Aaron Michael Butler, the man, the
Hey.
myth. First off, I wanted to apologize for sort of getting you on a podcast date the other day and then bailing because my life blew up, and then telling you probably the wrong time today. And anyway, but we're here, and I'm looking
All
forward to
good.
chatting. And I've been sort of, just to get us rolling here, I've been sort of tacitly, well, not tacitly, quietly trolling you on Facebook and seeing, a lot of my former students and friends and colleagues who I, you know, have met over the years, and it's like my Facebook tree is growing larger and larger every SoSI, and it's fun to see how folks are navigating the world now, years later. When did you come to SoSI? What year was that?
Uh, 2014, I think.
Okay,
Right after,
excuse me. So
yeah,
we have like 7 years is enough time
yeah.
for Aaron Butler to look back, and you have some data points. Is my point here,
I
for better or
guess
worse.
so. Sure. Yeah.
But we were sort of chatting before we got on the record here about how you're doing, and I sort of I want to let you start here. How are you? How is life? How was life in the past year and a half? I'm gonna assume a lot of things about how your life was, but I would prefer that you just tell me, because I think we're all assuming about how everybody's doing these days, and I don't want to assume anything. How was your life this last year? What did you? Where was your head at?
It was, I think in the grand scheme of things, my last year wasn't nearly as bad as it could have been.
Mm,
I got to keep. I mean, I didn't get to play any concerts or anything, obviously, but
mm-hmm,
like I was still able to rehearse here at
mm-hmm,
UW, and like we had in-person rehearsals and
mm-hmm,
recording sessions and stuff. And it I think in the moment I was like, it was like, this is so hard, and what is this even worth it? I was having these, like, as I'm sure most people were,
yeah, we all were.
kind of
Yeah.
struggle of like, why am I even doing this right now? Like, what's the point if I can't do this other thing? But
Right.
thinking about some other friends of mine who were even more isolated, and didn't even have that. Like, they couldn't even get in a room with two other people and you know work out notes just for themselves or something.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
So in the grand scheme, it was okay, but it was different to not have the things that I feel like make me a full person available to me.
Yeah, well, I would say, I mean, again, like I'm trying to call balls and strikes here. So tell me if the pitch you threw was a ball or a strike, and I'll and but like I have observed some things about you just online that this past year that I feel was a positive. It felt to me like a positive thing about you that I think I've kind of always felt, that you have this sort of not I don't, lone wolf is the wrong word. That implies like you're gonna go shoot up UPS or something, but
Yeah.
like, like, but you have this streak in you where you're totally fine being in a room by yourself with a vibraphone patched into a loop pedal and a distortion pedal, and not that that's what you want to do your entire life, but like that's not something that I wake up every day thinking I want to do. And I'm curious if that's, if me, like, is that a part of you that has always been there and is like I've just now noticed, or is that something that the pandemic sort of like squeezed out of you because you had no other choice?
I think that's always been there a bit. Like, yeah, I think I'm happy to do that stuff. If anything, I think in a lot of ways I did less of that over the pandemic. I think, especially in the
Mm,
early few months, I think I was
mm-hmm,
like trying to use it as a time to like, what if I didn't make art every day or something, or like, would this be okay with
mm-hmm,
me? Like, getting older and like thinking about the future and like, do I just keep slugging away at this? Is there anything else I can possibly do? You know, and I kind of like actively took took a step back, through last summer, I think. And I think the answer, and that's another thing that's like, it feels weird to say there's like a bright side or a benefit for me coming out of a pandemic that was terrible. But
mm-hmm,
I think the answer is like, I'm like, no, I don't think there's anything else that I can do. Like, I think this is it. So, but it was nice. It was like, because there was nothing necessary, no obligations, I was able to like, to unplug from that. that thing
Hmm.
of doing that and seeing how that went. But yeah, I think generally I can sit by myself for a long time and be okay.
Well, yeah, I mean, I mean, that's one thing that I've identified. You know, I've just sort of noticed about you and your online presence is that a lot of your, I mean, you're very supportive of other people's stuff, and you're always telling things, you know, telling people about things you love and that sort of thing. But in terms of the stuff you present, that is your, like, the stuff I know and no one's around,
Right.
and you know the lights are on and nobody's in the building except for you, you know,
Yeah.
and the janitors are even gone. You're not even going to get kicked out. Like,
Right.
that is the stuff that I see you putting up online, and I that's why I asked about the pandemic, because for me, and I'm curious about something you said, like, because it resonated with me. Like the first month of the pandemic, I think I had a similar, and I would say that even, no matter across the spectrum, even if you're not a musician, I think a lot of people were like, no, I'm not doing anything. You know, like,
Right.
don't, nobody's gonna tell me what to do right now. And
Hmm.
but I think in terms of how it affected musicians, for myself, I was really disappointed in humanity, or in the other people outside of the arts, who all of a sudden were like, musicians, this is your time.
Yeah.
You know,
Right.
and like,
Yeah.
there's no time like the present. You've got your instruments, you've got your cameras, and you've got your love of music. And
Right. Yeah.
and I there was a tiny part of me that just turned into like the 3-year-old child on the ground with a tantrum, and I'm like, no, I'm not doing anything for you. Even though I'd like, technically it's my job to do things for you. And yes, so
Right.
percussion is, we were transitioning to this online presence for a year and a half, and it's like, I none of us wanted, well, I'll speak for myself. I didn't want to transition online. Like, nobody,
Right.
there was a moment where even organizationally we're just like, no, no, no. And that lasted longer for me as an individual than it was able to last for So as an organization. We couldn't just kick our feet and stamp and scream. We had students who were like, had sent us money
Right.
to come to SoSI, you know? So like,
Right.
there
Yeah.
was only so much we as an organization could do that. But bro, you know,
Yeah. I wonder. Yeah. It's funny that you bring. Yeah. I wonder if maybe there was some type of like I'm still like maybe it was like an active like rebellion against that kind of standpoint. But I now yeah it feels like 3 years ago already, but like
yeah.
yeah, I'm remembering that thing of like, oh, the creatives can, you finally have time to do this stuff, and it's like, why are we pushing like hustle culture when we're all dealing with like an unprecedented in our lifetime event, and we're still like,
Right.
but we could just get more work done.
Well,
It's
and the
weird.
thing that's interesting though, that was like both frustrating but also kind of a little bit encouraging to me, because, you know, the term hustle culture is a thing, and I stamp my feet about it. It's like, no, I don't want your exposure right now. Like, this isn't the time to like offer musicians exposure, because now the world can watch you online, you know.
Right.
But some of my DNA lights up when there's a big open field of possibilities, and the only way to or not the only way, but all that has to happen is you have to build something and convince all those people in front of you that you're the most awesome, your passion is the most awesome thing. Like, there's a part of my DNA that lights up at that, that's like,
Right.
like, that's what So does every day. When we're not out there trying to like, you know, scorch earth policy, like get rid of other percussion groups or something, but like, there's this part of me that's like, oh, and if all I have to do is hustle to get to that, you know. Anyway, I'm saying I fought against that, but
Right.
people changed really quickly. You, as soon as June hit, and all of a sudden, you know, you have George Floyd, you have all the
Right.
protests, you have all this stuff. Everybody just decided, like, okay, time's over. We're done being inside alone. We're going to be together online and figure this out. And then that's when the
Right.
videos got better. You know,
Right. Yeah.
we weren't singing Imagine with 15 different famous people all out of key anymore. You know, that was sort of like we
Right.
were evolving as a species, and
Right.
the hustle culture reemerged, and people sort of won at that in a weird way, you know. But it's like, anyway, just to say, like, what creeped to the top during this lockdown was a lot of people trying to climb to the top and figure it out, you know.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it was, yeah, for sure. Yeah. Yeah,
I
you
don't have a
guys
good question in there. I'm sorry. There's
yeah,
that just
no,
as an observation.
you guys stayed pretty busy though. Yeah, like I mean, you were
Yeah, I mean,
like,
well,
did you get to like unplug or like have
not
your pandemic like I'm just gonna like be by myself and like live in my
for
head?
me personally, or or so as an organization.
Like for you, because so was
Hmm.
so was you guys were still putting on the Brooklyn Bound regularly and stuff like that, right? Like there was a
Yeah,
lot
that
going on.
stuff came a little. I mean, I would say that stuff kind of came. We did a thing over the summer. We did SoSI, and then we started the Brooklyn Bounds, I think, in the fall. And then we did the collaborative workshop in January, and then this SoSI thing. So there was definitely a period of us trying to figure out like what. Like there was just a lot of us saying. Sorry, before I get to my thing, there was a lot of us as an in the organization just saying, I don't know. Like I don't know what we can and can't do yet, and so let's just put out support, and then when we can, like, whether it be like, I think with the George Floyd thing, I think as an organization we saw a lot of people reacting extreme in one way or extreme in another, and then at each other all day. And as
Mhm.
an organization we were like, this is a very complicated thing. I think it's okay to say we're here to support. When it came to online concerts, or actually for us it was the lot like live streaming,
Mhm.
like we all lived in different states. Nobody knew what the virus really was, and you saw like Third Coast was meeting in person, Sandbox was meeting in person. The four of us were coming from different states that all had different laws, and so we were like, I don't know. Like
Right.
I don't know if I feel comfortable driving to New York to do a live stream concert, and so we just didn't. And we
Right.
decided to try to do as much as we could by like supporting things online and going that route. And I think I think we stand behind that move. It was a tricky one, but because we'd all, of course, prefer to be in person. As an organization, we just didn't have that much time to. We just said I don't know a lot, but we didn't say we didn't shut down. We were constantly just like we need information. Just like, give us more data. Give
Right.
us more data. Give us more data. Like
Yeah.
we didn't know if SoSI was going to be in person, and we couldn't make that call. Princeton was making that call, but they were making that call super late, just like everybody was. And
Right.
so, but for me personally, I think I did have a moment where I was like, had to figure out the online recording situation, which I did a little bit, but was never really forced to have to get good at.
Right.
Man, the hardest thing for me was the Zoom teaching.
Zoom teaching is rough. Yeah.
I think that
I,
was, I would say the year round, like, or at least for the last year and a half, I would say the thing for me that was the like never go back if I can avoid it at all costs is teaching anything on Zoom.
yeah, you were doing like a steel band stuff.
Steel band at NYU, chamber music at NYU, and then the steel band at Princeton, and then So was doing a writing for percussion class at
Yeah.
Princeton. That was sort of hybrid. Some of the guys were getting together and demonstrating and stuff in person, but
Yeah, the ensemble over Zoom is rough. I didn't have to direct anything like that, or like I didn't teach a lesson, but I did have like this, you know, 300 student class the first like spring quarter, so early in the pandemic, all online. It was like a concert, kind of like, talking about music and like I can't even remember the name of the course here. It's like the concert season or something, and it's like one of these like you go to concerts and you write about them, and that's the great. It's like
right,
super
right.
chill. But then I was like, there's no concerts to go to, so what do we do? And but then it's just like everybody's cameras are off. I'm like talking to people, and I'm like, there's nothing coming back. I was like, this is the worst. Yeah, Zoom teaching is I think the worst part.
Yeah, in terms of me putting my foot down, that was, I mean, it was, I mean, I had to, like, there was no other option, really. I mean, you sort of had to, I had to do my job, but it was the part, I think, that I was, of the things I did well this year and a half, I think that is the thing that was at the bottom of the pile. I think I just, like, did the best, I felt like I did the best I could, but it was
Yeah.
not my high point. Sorry, go ahead. Were you gonna say something?
No, I think probably everybody I know feels that way. So I think there's some comfort in that. I think everybody was just like, I did what I could.
Yeah.
I don't think anybody, nobody I know personally that has had to teach anything over Zoom the last year is like, you know what, I nailed
Yeah.
it.
Well, it just feels like you're a trauma surgeon. That's like I felt like every time you leave the ER, like well, actually not even that because the ER doctors like know the tools they're working with. This is in like what they're everything. It's like I felt like you're a trauma surgeon on like a Civil War battlefield. You know, like where somebody's legs bleeding and you're like, I don't know, cut it off. Like that's
Right?
like
Yeah.
if all you had to do was pinch it shut. It probably would have been hard, but it would have been fine. Because we're all dealing with Zoom. It's like I'm sharing like chat threads with my friends that I shouldn't be sharing, and like oh my god,
Right.
well, listen, one of the reasons I reached out to you was because you posted something the other day that was talking, I don't want to imply that all you do post is doom metal on vibraphone, which I would say just calling balls and strikes is a large percentage of what you post, but uh, you also post a lot about your passion for bitters and mixology, and
Yeah.
but also you posted something about local arts funding, and I think that is something that I would love to get that piece of fat in our mouths and chew on a little bit here because I think it's prescient. It's prescient for all the things we've just been talking about. Like we're coming out now. I think it's awesome that the cicadas came out this year because it's sort of like they're like a big metaphor for about like what we're all about to do, and
Yeah.
there's a lot of money flying around
Yeah.
everywhere in the government, in grants, and all of these other places, and where it's going, whether it be like SBA loans going to Target and the Wynn Casino in Las Vegas rather than your local bakery. If you had control over all of that funding, or you had control over your local, let's say you're the new arts commissioner, and what town do you live in?
Seattle.
Seattle, Washington. You're now in charge of the arts, like the ways and means of how money gets distributed in Seattle. Like
Mm.
what would be your priorities before we get to like what reality is? What would be your priorities now if you didn't have any of those realities facing you? Had a big pile of money.
Um, maybe it's like, uh, I mean, I think I would honestly focus on people who just don't usually have access to those types of funding. And I think there's a lot of, I mean, there's like so many reasons why people don't have access to those kinds of things and would otherwise do really great things. Um, but uh, yeah, so like looking at underrepresented peoples, whether that's for race or sex or religion or or whatever, or just like low SES, like people who don't apply for grants because they have nothing and don't think that like that's for them, or
When you say
that's
SES, what does that mean?
like socioeconomic status,
Oh, got it.
right?
Okay.
Like,
Hmm.
yeah, like yeah, I think uh, I would try to find a way to actively get that money somewhere that I'm like I feel like often I see things that are like funded by whatever agencies are funding stuff, and I'm like, those are the people that needed the funding. Like they seem to be doing okay. Like they needed another like 5 Gs for a commission when there are like people like literally with no access to that kind of dough. That I think that little bit of dough would have a huge impact on like a lower tier artist or somebody who doesn't typically have access to that kind of stuff versus like certain other organizations or people who are like they're doing okay, and it's like, is that uh it doesn't mean as much going to certain people, I think. And so I
Right.
would try to like I think that would be my focus, is like trying to get that into the hands of people who might not otherwise get it.
I mean, everything you're saying to me makes total sense. One of the things that struck me about the way sometimes these system, when I say system, I'm using, it's a very broad term. I don't like it when people are like, tear the system down. I'm like, okay, what do you mean? Where are you going to start? You're
Mm.
going to start with your local wastewater treatment plant? Okay, well, you're going to start pooping in a bucket and taking it out to the street by yourself. That's a system too. Your taxes go there too. Well, no, we're going to keep that. Okay, what else are we going to keep? Pretty soon you got basically all of society except for like your neighbor who you loathe, like, and it's like, oh, you just hated your neighbor. I understand what
Right.
so I'm using that term loosely here, but when the SBA loan thing happened and like the PPP, all of that stuff, and the government's like, here's $1 trillion, good luck, and I was immediately aware of how much Eric Chabich meant to the organization and how little power I had. That if I was a small business owner by myself, I definitely wouldn't have gotten any of that stuff.
Mm.
Because when I opened those things, bro, those applications were confusing. They were launched at midnight on a day, and the banks didn't even get the legislation from the government until 9 p.m. So in
Mm.
3 hours, Bank of America had, boom, the clock's ticking, 3 hours. They've got to get these applications out to the country. And who is waiting at midnight? Eric Chabich. Why? Because he's been writing grants for 15 years and is a nerd and loves going clickety clack, and like just like filling out forms. And when I saw, like, a month later, you saw all of the things that happened, I was like, of course that happened. Like, there's not necessarily, like, I think when we talk about folks who don't have anything, it's not that there's like a self-esteem like, oh, I'll never have that. It's like you make one click. I've been swimming in the system of grant money with So Percussion for 15 years because of Eric, and I'm terrified when I open that link.
Right.
Imagine
Yeah.
somebody who's never applied for a grant ever.
Yeah. Right. Exactly. Yeah.
Eric's, so anyway, just to say, like, it, of course that happened. You know why Target and IHOP got the SBA loans? Because they have somebody who's not afraid to open those links and can just fill them out.
Right.
Like, and so my question then to you is, knowing that, and you have $100 million as the guy who's in charge of running Seattle Arts. What is your, do you, well, let me ask you this. Do you have an account? Because one of the things about why that paperwork's crazy, and yes, the SBA loan thing was crazy, but, applying to the NEA, applying to your local, like the Seattle Arts Council, it's going to have a huge amount of paperwork. Why? Because there's an accountability thing that has to happen. You have
Right.
to then, there's all this reporting, you have to send in budgets. Like, so to me, what I see there in terms of gatekeeping isn't necessarily like an active, like somebody's there like, okay, that's a black person, keep them out. Let's let the white person in. It's just like, just to even get in the door, you have to understand this language. And so so do we educate everybody on that language so that when everybody's in the pool, we're all competing on the same level? Or do we change the language? Or do we do both? Is it a yes and sort of sitch?
Yeah, I think, yeah, yeah, and it's like I also get those things, right? These like like people have to be held accountable for the money they're spending, and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
But I think personally, I would like to see it, the cumbersome nature of
Mm-hmm.
applying for this type of funding be made simpler. I think there's a way to make it more simple,
Mm-hmm.
um, and less like yeah, just there's got to be a way. We're smart enough, like we've done so much as humans. There's a way to make this easier and also not lose any of this kind of other accountability thing. And I think, like but I don't know what that is. I just hit drums, like
No, but I think, like, that's that. I mean, I'm saying something to you that I say out loud to myself too. Like, I say that to as a way of abdicating my responsibility the moment I hit the thing I don't know how to answer. Like, well, I don't know. I just hit drums. I'm just like, I'm gonna, yeah, don't talk to me. And like, I don't know what phantom power is. I just play drums until I then had to understand a mic needs phantom power, bro. Like,
Right.
and I think with this grant stuff, I personally within So Percussion, I abdicate my personal uh, desire to learn more about grants because I don't have to because Eric does it. And I would say maybe he doesn't have to learn about cash flow budgeting because I deal with all that and I learn. But I think if I wasn't with Eric, I would be like, okay, I gotta learn how to write these. I gotta learn how to do this. But
Right.
I think something you said
You know,
earlier. Go ahead.
oh,
Sorry,
sorry.
please.
The-
No, go ahead.
well, I just had this thought, and I think it's like I think maybe the way that I see a solution to this issue is like maybe not even the language has to change, but like what if the people that held those funds, whatever that is, if it's a presenting organization, it's your like local government arts director, like whoever it is that holds funds, was more proactive in figuring out what to do with it and reaching out to people versus waiting for the people who understand the game to come to them and ask for it. So like if you're a curator or a arts person whose job it is to use this money to like maybe being more active in like seeking out those things,
Well, I think
and that's like the responsibility that those people can take on, or like having somebody there specifically to like walk somebody through the process who might not know, where like I think my experience with having to go into like some type of office or something and talk to somebody is like condescension from the people that are like, what, you don't know how to do this, the form is online, what, there's like they don't have the time to like talk to you about the thing, so like um maybe there's something there, like having somebody compassionate who's compassionate for people who might not understand the process to like help them with it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there is a bit of a more, there is more of a disconnect, I think, in the people between the, like, it is in comparison, say, to like presenters and musicians. The presenter at Carnegie Hall to the presenter at the Stone in New York, like two different, completely different venues. They all have personal relationships with the artists that come into their spaces. Maybe not with the people who rent the spaces, like at Carnegie Hall is a rental space too, but even then, like, you're not just going to let some total random person rent your space. Like, you look into who's coming because people don't know that they've rented the space. Everyone assumes Carnegie Hall is presenting the Iowa State Community John Philip Sousa band. Like that's
Right.
what everybody assumes, right? And so you have to vet those of who you're coming into your hall. The Stone does the same thing. They have a curator, and that curator picks people to come in. But you have to have relationships, and I think between grant organizations and musicians, that's like one more step removed just by default. And I think, but I would say there is a misconception though that that those folks in grant organizations don't have a presenter mindset. They do. And in Eric's experience, the first thing he always says when he's on these calls about advice around grants and applying for them is like, there's a human being. Usually, grant organizations, even the biggest one, the NEA, there's like 8 people that work in the office that you would call for the grant you're applying for, and usually those 8 people are humongous nerds
Mhm.
because they've been loving art their whole life. And yeah, maybe there's a bureaucrat in there, but like the person you're going to email on your application is an Aaron Butler, is a Caroline Shaw, is somebody else who's sitting in that office who's really passionate about it. And 9 times out of 10, they'll email you right back and they'll give you advice on something you have a question about. It's just they don't advertise that. Maybe they
Right.
should. But I think I'm always telling my friends, like in the pan community, I'm just like, do not be afraid to knock on doors. Like, like you're gonna get turned away a bunch, but
Right.
people will help. You just got to reach out. But
Yeah.
something you said earlier about the about small grants, and this is something for me. I'm working with a group called Pan in Motion in Brooklyn. That's a group that Kendall Williams started. It's 5 of us. and it's like an advocacy organization around pan in the New York area. And the so my foot's in So Percussion, but also, on Monday nights I'm working with Pan in Motion. The impact of a $2,000 grant to So Percussion, it is a drop in a bucket that is useful, and we use it for scholarships for SoSI and all these other things. But the ripples it makes in a $2,500 grant versus what a $2,500 grant would do for Pan in Motion, not in terms of like long-term sustainability, but I think a lot of organizations like Pan in Motion, like Aaron Butler Incorporated, like small presenting organizations, even like the Stone, which is like, I keep using them as this example, but it's like it's a small brick room run by John Zorn that it's like the air conditioner never works. And their sound system isn't all that great. The piano's never really been tuned all that much. And so it's not like has a ton of money just to blow on this space, right? And so $2,500 there is a game changer, right?
Right.
I wish that I feel like grants are just sometimes too big, and that gives the perception that it's like, well, that's just a crazy number. $10,000 to Pan in Motion is just a nutso number. To So Percussion, that's a commission. But to Pan in Motion, that's we can survive for a year.
Right. Right.
And so how do we change the mindset of like grant organizations to understand that impact actually might then set them up, these organizations, to be armed to then apply for the $10,000 to $15,000 grants later on down the line.
Yeah. Yeah. That's again, like I don't know the inner workings, so I'm like I just like yeah, how do we do that? How do we change it?
Well, this is the other thing too that I keep talking about this book because it's so good. It's called Bury the Chains. It's by Adam Hawkschild, and it's about the end of the British slave trade in like the mid or early 1830s, leading to the abolishment of the slave trade in 1838 in England. And it's basically the story of like 12 people in England that were advocates of all stripes. Like there was a former slave working with a former slave ship owner, John Newton, the guy who wrote Amazing Grace, or took the hymn tune Amazing Grace and put words to it, and was a slave ship owner for 40 years. He was Jeff Bezos of, in terms of like being successful at a thing. And I want to take, that was maybe a bad comparison, but in terms of like somebody who was like at the top of his field, like John Newton, but he had a come to Jesus moment later in his life and was like, what have I done? And teamed up with these 11 other people, former slave. And like, anyway, it really imparted me this idea that like, and their job was to change the mindset of society. Mm-hmm. And they were very calculating about it, and they decided that they couldn't change the mindset enough to get people convinced that slavery was bad. What they wanted to do was convince people that the British slave trade was bad. The act of putting people on a ship, taking them elsewhere, like they needed to end that, because that act was, having somebody serve you tea wasn't the end of the world. And you're not going to convince some local, elite in England to give up their tea servant. But if you can show them the horrors of a slave trade. And so it was a really calculated thing. And it really hit home this idea that history is made in terms of days, not years. Like the slave trade ended slavery in America ended 56,000 days ago, not 156 years ago. Like that feels way different, And so when we talk about, sorry, that was a tangential comparison to slavery in a really great book. But I think when we think about like these mindsets of like, how do we change your grain? Or well, Aaron, you go work for one, and then you have a meeting with them. And when they're in a meeting and they're just like, okay, we've got $100 million here. What do we do with it? Then you go, whoop. And then what happens is they go, Aaron, you're a dum-dum, go get me a coffee. And then you go, how do I make that argument differently next time? So that next year, and then 5 years into working for a grant organization, you have managed to peel off $60,000 for people you care about. you know, and like I think then the investment you have to ask is like, well, is that the route I want to go? Am I willing to spend 5 years of my life getting nothing so that maybe I can do that? Or do I want to start my own grant organization and do it the way I want to do it from the ground up? Do you have a rich friend who can give you $50,000 that you give away five of every year?
Right.
You know, you got to have some money to make more money later to keep giving away. That's how endowments work. Endowments have like that pay 250 grand to some endowment. There's $8 million sitting in a bank account somewhere that's not
Right.
getting touched. And so
Yeah.
I don't know, like of all those options for you, like what's the least and most appealing option?
I think, yeah, you know, I would love to have a rich friend that would just give me money to start my own. If you know any rich friends
Keep
who are,
making friends because you never know which one is rich. That's my advice. Just walk into stores and be like, "You want to be my friend? You want to be my friend? I'm cool." Trust me, man. You got enough mixology experience. You can get enough people drunk enough to be your friend. You know, before you know it, you got a bunch of drunk rich friends.
yeah, that's what I need to work on. Yeah, do some private event
Yeah,
bartending
listen.
for some rich people. Yeah, I think I just don't think I have the uh, personality to be in the room doing that stuff. Like I think I'm like feet on the ground, like out in the stuff, like
Well,
trying to be an advocate, you know. But you know, and I would love to like I would at some point in my life I would love that it would be great to have control of like where some dough goes, you know, and and uh and I would love to just like do it like 5 minute pitch style. Like you come in and pitch your idea of how you're going to use this
Shark
money
Tank
to me,
style.
and then it's like somebody else will handle the paperwork. There will be somebody else to like do all the stuff that makes it look good
Oh,
on
okay, good.
paper.
I just want. I'm glad we cleared up that there still will be a mountain of paperwork. You're just
I
not
mean,
going to do it. I
right,
see.
well, I mean, I'm just assuming we're still operating within this system where
Oh,
there has
okay, all right.
you know, like I mean, I would much rather
Hey,
not have
man,
any and
listen.
just be
Hey,
like,
one
that sounds
second.
great.
There's a delivery at the house. Let me go run.
Oh yeah.
Let me go run and get it real quick. I'll be right back.
Yeah, I think I would love some money to give to people, and I would what's that kind of, you know, it was like a super cheesy movie. Was it like Jim Carrey is like a loan officer and then he just starts approving every single loan? Like somebody's just like, I need some money to do this, and he's like, yeah,
Well,
yeah, take it. I think I would be that
that's
guy. I'd be like, yeah,
not
you
a
need
very good. You won't
15.
be one for very long, then, Aaron. That's that's generally not a good way to give out money. Even the nicest people, I have had the fortune to be around a lot of wealthy people just in my time with and coming across different donor events and meeting different funders for things and people who run organizations and blah blah blah. And most people are very nice. And but even the nicest, most generous people are like, "What are you gonna do with this?" You know, they want to be sure that it's not even a like vetting stuff. It's just to like people want to make sure that their money is being spent well. You do.
Yeah.
You know, you don't donate to things that you think are just going to throw your money down the toilet, do you?
No.
Yeah, so like why would a billionaire? Like why would a
Right.
millionaire? Why would somebody that way? So but I want to just like I don't want you to feel like I'm pushing on you here, but like
No, that's all good.
you started it with your Facebook post, so I want to blame it on
Uh,
you. The the I think people underestimate how much power they have. And I think you are underestimating how much. I think you're underestimating two things. When you say when you say I'm a guy that where like, my feet's on the ground, that room where the grants get disseminated, you know, Eric's been in that room, Adam has been in that room, and they make the decisions. They decide with like
yeah.
16 other people. Theo Blackman is on panels. Like Aaron Butler, all you have to do is get in that world enough, and you are a person who is giving money out to people. And you don't have to change your hat. You don't have to shave your beard. You don't have to stop making doom metal on vibraphones. But I just want to friendly caution you that don't wait for the room to appear to you where the money will be where you can disseminate it. Kick that door
Yeah.
down. First of all, make friends with everybody in that room first, and then politely open the door,
Right.
and then quietly get in there. And just before you know it, your friends have money.
Right.
And anyway, take that for what
Yeah.
it's worth.
Yeah. No, I agree. But I think I also come from, a background that it's like a lot of the stuff seemed like I somehow managed to make it where I am, which is not very far. Uh, but having come from like a family with basically nothing,
Mm,
and like most people don't get to like the degrees that I have, or even having the option to
yeah.
study music from like the world that I grew up in. So I understand. So like I still hang on to that stuff for sure. Of like that world's not for me. So that's like, so I think a lot of my looking at that is like understanding people who don't even have what I have,
Hmm.
being like, well, of course they're not going to even try,
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I think I should also, like, this post that I made talking about that. I think, I was also in my head thinking more about like the next kind of level down when I was making this,
Mm,
like this idea that's been bouncing around, is like not necessarily like the NEA, but like the people who get like the presenting orgs within communities and cities that get that NEA money and
hmm.
then bring in artists, and
Mm,
they are choosing to curate a certain thing. So I think that post was generated by that thought, and like
mm,
seeing like this thing of like, well, there's tons of local musicians and artists in any community that could be tapped to perform on a series or something.
mhm,
But it's like a lot of times it's like, you know it's bigger tier artists or
mhm,
people who, and so the idea kind of came from that thing of like, uh and I'm thinking specifically about some very specific orgs that I'm not going to like put on blast or anything, but this idea of like in the world that we live in now, facing like the kind of economic and like environmental crises that are like on the horizon,
mhm,
like why do we keep flying people around the world to do like little one-off shows or something versus like, well, we should still have local art, and like that art can be truly local if local artists are used and given the opportunity to be a part of these bigger presentations. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
and and I don't say that to be like we shouldn't be flying So Percussion across the country to perform or
That's
something like that.
certainly how it sounded to me, Aaron Butler. I wasn't going to say anything, but when you talk about
No,
flying somewhere for the one-off gig, that is so percussion in a
but
nutshell.
I mean, I get it, but I think I made the comparison of like, like there's always going to be like a desire for,
Wagyu, I think, is something you said.
like there's always going to be like, yeah, somebody wants like a Wagyu steak that's like,
I like to think my fat is
whatever.
evenly proportioned through my body, Aaron.
But like, but like, do we need it all the time or something? Um, and like, yeah, I there's, and it's, yeah, I don't know. Like, I'm trying not to put this specific like, I don't want to put anything on blast, so I'm trying not to use very specific examples that I have in
I
my head
understand. I
about what
understand.
this kind of thing is. But yeah, I think like if you have if you have a concert series and somebody's performing and it's like you need a violinist to play on this thing, like, do you have to bring in a violinist from Berlin just because, like, they maybe have a name, or like
Mm-hmm.
when there's plenty of like local people who can like play that gig or something, and like be tied into, and then it like truly becomes a communal thing. And I think it's that community buzzword of like when people like when presenting orgs like to use like, oh, we're building community, and you are with like the people who want to see that presentation, who are like the crowds, or like, you know, the people who come to the show. But like the community is also the people who play the stuff. And like if you're to me, it's like if you're really talking about like your local community, then why not use local artists, you know?
I
um
mean, what would you
and so
feel?
I was thinking a lot more about that end of the thing than when I made that post, than like like top of the stack, like, you know,
Well,
organizations.
to me, I feel like it's okay to think of. I mean, well, let me ask you this: what would be a good percentage breakdown for you? And again, like I just want to keep. And again, like your mind could change tomorrow, and you could get more in one direction or more in another. But like we're also making some assumptions here that this is, or we have to say that this is happening within the vacuum of a capitalist market where so percussion also exists, and we do get grant funding and donorship. But if we took out the concert part where we're actually physically going and like making a product that people see, like, and if we didn't have people come to the shows, eventually that's not sustainable. Like their butts and seats are the part of the market economy here that a fully funded government arts program doesn't necessarily need to worry about. If we put as much money in the arts in America as we do into Tomahawk missiles, so
Right.
percussion would worry less about butts and seats. But then, there's just different worries. Like I don't know what happens then. Like if we just don't ever care who comes to our shows and we're playing fully funded stuff, I would hope that there's a different type of investment in community organizing and building that gets people butts and seats, you know. But in this particular instance, like what would be in a concert hall in Seattle, like what would be a breakdown that you feel could survive the market economy that we're all in, where like my mom, whether I like it or not, when Evelyn Glennie comes to town, she knows who Evelyn Glennie is.
Mm.
And if Evelyn Glennie's playing a concert at the Kent State Tusk Performing Arts Center that seats 4,000 people and is going to sell it out because she's Evelyn Glennie, so percussion's not going to sell that out. And my mom will definitely be there when I'm there, and she's going to bring two of her friends, but there's going to be 325 people in that hall.
Mm.
So that performing arts venue has to make a call here. What are we going to do? Like, so for you, what's a good breakdown of local versus international, or not even international, but just like interstate, like, or intrastate.
Right. You know, I mean, I if I was just gonna pick a number, I would say like minimum, I think I would be like 60-40,
Mm-hmm.
leaning towards low. I mean, I don't think there's a reason that it shouldn't lean more local or more community driven than not, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And I get it. Like I also get the thing of, you know, like you got to have somebody who's going to like put butts in seats so that that organization can recoup costs or keep surviving. But part of me like thinks like, you know, when I see presenters like, you know, if somebody puts on like a lower tier artist and it's like, oh, we're like featuring this local person or organization, or like we're putting up this person's visual art, whatever it might be, like the promotion is different behind that. And maybe it's because they're not getting as much money coming in, so they're like, we can't spend that much money promoting this thing.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like, but in you know, this is all like overly simplified, but um like why not put the kind of hype, if you have this kind of presenting power and this kind of clout that people trust you as an organization to present stuff, like you should throw that weight around to present, to hype up the people that they might not know or pay attention to just because they don't already have the clout, right? And I mean, it's a tale as old as time, like with like underground rock scene, right? It's like nobody cares about the bands until you hit a certain level, and then everybody's like, I love that band, you know, they're from my hometown, but they never went to see them when they played the basement of a bowling alley or something, you
Yeah,
know,
the Meat
like,
Puppets, nobody cared about the Meat Puppets until they were on Unplugged with Nirvana. I
right.
mean, like, well, let me say, no casual music fan cared about Meat Puppets. There were hardcores in Seattle that were
Right.
like, yeah, of course I know who the Meat Puppets are, you know.
Right. Right. No, but you know, like, what if those organizations use their like name to like truly try to bring that type of attention to, other than just like being like, oh well, we did our local feature, you know, but they like really took the people who pay attention to that organization. They were like, you should be paying attention to these people the same way that you would pay attention to whoever, you know.
Well, this is. Can I
um
ask? This is. I want to sort of ask this next question in ask it in a way that maybe you and I can agree to wall off the next 5 minutes as like a. I don't want to say a safe space, but just a like. I hope my intent is clear here. The other factor that we're not really calculating here is taste. And every human being who's in charge of something likes something more than another, in the same way that they like deep dish pizza over pizza from New Haven. It's not rational all the time. The number of times I've seen artists that I think are objectively not serious, haven't thought about what they do, and past that aren't good. I mean, hundreds of times, places I've been, and I'm just like, how in God's name? People I've played with, who I've then realized, like, oh my God, you're not a serious person. Oh Lord, like, how did you get all these gigs? Like, and so this is Aaron Butler's now got to make some choices about local artists, and you've got two local artists who can do this show, this series of yours, and you've got a third who really wants to do it and is a good friend of those other two, but their art is awful, bro.
mm,
And they're a local artist, or you think their art is awful. Let's actually let's actively put that ingredient in here. Aaron Butler secretly is like, I want to be supportive, but holy shit, their stuff is so bad. like it's okay to think that something is bad. That doesn't mean they're a bad person, and that's what I
right.
want to draw these clear distinctions here. I have lots of friends who I don't understand all the time where they're coming from with their art. And I can say out loud to them, yeah, I don't think I like that piece. I've said that to Cenk Ergun sometimes, like right to his face, bro. I love you so much that I will play this piece any day. I will leave my wife and go on tour for months and play this piece because I love you. I do not like this piece. And like, anyway, so that but that's part of the equation for me with Cenk. Like his music is serious and I take it seriously cuz he does. I don't like it. That's a
Mm.
different thing. And I don't like all of Xenakis' music. Are you kidding me? I don't like
Right.
listening to Mateau. Go screw yourself if you're gonna put me in a room by myself and listen to Mateau. But will I play it? Absolutely, because it's serious and I take it seriously. So like, how do you chew on that truth about yourself, a person who clearly likes some things more than others?
Yeah, I mean, I think you know, when I have had like, you know, whatever little series I might run or have some type of curatorial power, I think, you know, I like to, maybe I'm, well, uh, I think I've definitely booked people that I'm not personally a fan of their art
Mm-hmm.
because I think that, um, because I think that other people enjoy it, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
trying to like think of like outside of myself, like I'm not the only one in the room, so like, is there a good reason to have this person
Mm-hmm.
present in whatever way or what medium, because somebody else is going to enjoy it, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that kind of, you know, and if a presenter is not able to, and I'm not, you know, I'm not perfect, clearly. I think my solution would be to have like as diverse a set of people like informing that, because like the more, you know, I think this is the conversation that's coming up a lot
Mm-hmm.
more, especially in the last year, is like what who are the people deciding, and how diverse are their interests and experiences. Um, and I think that's also a key to that, is like, because we all have blind spots, and so um, so yeah, like I personally have no problem, I think, having like something where I'm like, I'm not totally into that, but I'll show it. I'm not gonna play it though. I'm different than you in that way. I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
my friends that I'm like, I'm not gonna play that piece. I really love you, but I'm not
Well,
gonna.
this is, yeah, I mean, this is like, I'm in a different situation where I'm a little more handcuffed than you. I can't just, because then I'm like, well, I guess I'll sub this gig out and pay somebody else $1,500 to learn this piece, and I can't afford that, so I'm gonna have to go ahead and learn this piece. But anyway, I mean, it's a first world problem I'm having over here,
Yeah,
just to be
yeah.
clear.
No, but I would like to think that I would have the ability to kind of like remove my own tastes from the situation and try to be as objective as I possibly can. Is like, just because I don't enjoy this, does that mean it's not worth presenting? Like,
I think,
those things are usually not, you know, mutually exclusive.
no, I totally agree, and it's part of why I asked the question was sort of just to point out what I think is an obvious thing that like, and I tried to express it with my jank analogy,
Right.
but that like for me, and just the data points I've acknowledged or I've noticed over my last 15 years with is that relationships trump everything,
Mm.
always, always, like
Right.
with the exception of like violent crime and like true aggression towards someone and like really being a jackass, like that's where relationships sort of break down for me and I'm like, okay, you're just being a jackass and I don't need this relationship anymore. But the relationships I constantly am leaning on and the people and the organizations that So goes to and the organizations I know that we've worked with, like, and I can imagine for a presenting organization, it's like, yes, have a diverse body of people, but also work long and hard at developing long relationships with every artist you work with. Like, those are the people that you're going to bring back 10
Mm.
times over your lifetime to do a variety of projects. And that artist, even if that artist is a white man who you just have known your whole life, that person is going to bring in 15 other people every time they do a project into your organization.
Mm.
And if you know their values are in a spot and you have a long relationship with them, like, anyway, it's just, I think one of the things right now that I hope people are thinking about is building relationships with your
Yeah.
artists, no matter who you're working with, because that's really at the end of the day, because the money's going to be gone someday. What are you left
Right.
with?
For sure. Yeah. I think that the to to like take that in it, maybe this is just like from where I'm sitting, I see these things and I like that are like at what to go back to the kind of percentage of like what
Hmm.
percentage should be local. It's like, how often does the same person need to be brought back? Like because there are examples where it gets, to me it's just like, really, them again? Like, you're doing that again? Like, why not?
What, like in
Like,
terms,
how often does a presenting organization need to present the same big names, where like maybe that goes to somebody else one
well,
year?
let me
That's
ask let me
fine,
ask you a question about that specifically, because one of the things, like, we have gone back to Carnegie Hall now. I think this is going to in January or in December is going to be our sixth or seventh time. Their restrictions on us have always been brand spanking new every time. You do not get to come in here and just play drumming or Dan Truman's piece. You don't get to just come in with Caroline Shaw, even though that's really fun. Like, you don't get to do that every time. Gotta be brand new. Like, are you, when you're talking about these artists, are you saying like they brought in the Fab Four cover band to be the like big seller every year and they come in and do She Loves You, yeah, yeah, yeah? Or is it like, is it an organization that comes in every year and does Pleiades and that's all they do every time they come in? Or like what in specific are you talking about locally?
I think it's like, for me sometimes it's like, even if it's a whole new show, like, oh, we learned a new piece and
Mm-hmm.
now we're showing that, and that's an excuse to come back again. And again, I'm not saying that shouldn't happen, and I think those long relationships are like good, and I don't disagree. It's just like sometimes it can seem a little like, well, okay, of course, like you look at like whoever's calendar for next season, and then you look at somebody else's calendar, and then you look at somebody else's calendar, and it's just like, these are all the same, like, and it feels a little like, um it feels a little like people, like, I wonder like how much of this is like a true belief in what you're presenting versus like, well, so and so did it, so we have to do
Oh,
it
I see what you're
too.
saying.
and we have to bring those people in because we have to be on par
I
with
see. Okay.
whatever other thing, and then it becomes this kind of like McDonaldization, right, where it's like like I
Mm.
don't want to go to every city and see the same things.
Okay.
Like
All
I
right.
don't want to
So
have the same meal everywhere. Like I would much rather like a series in Alabama be an Alabama series that feel like that somehow represents
okay.
that place,
Yeah, your argument makes more sense to me now. I think hearing, yeah, and I say that because early on, so was like the only restaurant we would eat at on tour because we could afford it and we knew exactly where our table was going to be was Chili's. Like you could go to any Chili's in the world. You
Right,
could be in Latvia or you could be in
right,
Des Moines, Iowa, and you know where your seat's going to be,
right,
and you get your bottomless chips and your Diet Cokes, and it's heaven.
right,
But but I think you bring up a good point. And it's something I think I'm ignorant of. Because I don't work in I mean, so technically now as a presenting organization, but Brooklyn Bound doesn't really count because we're not, we're like the local, we're a food truck. We're not a
right,
McDonald's. We're not even a McDonald's. We're a food truck, like, but I don't know how much of that, of like, what, if I'm running a series in a town that's off the beaten path, like, what do I want people to perceive me? Do I want to be seen as a local heavy? Do I want to be seen as somebody when I go to APAP, people know who I am? Do I want?
right.
I don't know how much of that happens. I'm sure it happens a lot more than I see.
Mhm.
But also, just the presenters that I've worked with, we very few presenters that we go work with, we don't have a personal relationship with, or don't, when we first meet them, work really hard to develop a long relationship with them, even if it's like a small series that we've been at for the first time, like, because we want to go back, because the more we go back, the more freedom we have to do things like SoSI. And so, like, for us, it's like that is a complicating factor here. But your argument, I think, stands in terms of like a mindset. I liked what you said about like really being an Alabama performing arts organization, or really being like, what's a Washington State?
Right,
What does that look like? What is Washington State's artistic culture? How does it differ from Texas? And I'm not
right,
casting like value judgments here. I'm just saying like Texas music culture is awesome. South by Southwest
yeah,
is one of the most revered festivals in the world, but it's not Seattle,
right.
and that's okay. Like, so how do you then do that while also, if you want to be recognized on a national level, where you do have where artists like So Percussion, who are not from Alabama, I want to come play that Alabama festival because that shit is the shit. Like, that's, yeah, like
Right.
The Eau Claire Festival actually in Wisconsin. I think Justin Vernon. That's like the thing that popped to mind for me, of like really trying to curate a lot of friends, but a real sense of like, this is a Wisconsin festival. Like, this doesn't get any more Eau Claire than this, and
Right.
but how do you sort of scale that up?
Right. Yeah, and I think there's a place for that Alabama festival to or series to have so percussion, right? It's just like
Mm-hmm,
again,
mm-hmm.
I think it's like this thing of like maybe we don't need it all the time. Like we don't need uh we don't need to eat so percussion is wagyu, man. We can't have that every day.
I would love for us to be compared to an animal that's not like curated by humans for our consumption. Like, no, what's that terrible duck liver stuff? Not what is that stuff that where they just feed a duck and then people are,
Yeah, yeah.
anyway,
I
not
can't.
that stuff, and not
So
wagyu.
percussion is a rare truffle
Okay, yeah,
harvested from the
we were nosed out of the ground by a Jack Russell Terrier, and like, I'm fine
we
with that.
don't need
You and you
we
better
don't
use
need
us
that
in
every day.
very small quantities. Very small quantities. You ever watch Chopped
Uh, a little bit, yeah,
on
yeah,
the Food
yeah.
Network? I love it. Like, you could always tell the inexperienced chef. Like, at the end, their dish isn't done, and they're just like, "Ding, let's get truffle oil," and all the judges are like, "No, don't do it." They're just like, "Boop boop 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 boop."
Yeah,
It's like, let's grab
yeah,
the most expensive. Okay. Anyway, Aaron, I don't think I have any more. I have more questions now than I had when we came in, which is great. That's what I love conversations like that, and I appreciate you drilling down with me on this, because I think no matter how serious you felt about your post, I think it's something that I took it seriously because I think about that stuff a lot. I mean, we are and I'm trying to have these ethical discussions of like, what do we, how do you, why are we,
Right.
now we're talking about like vaccine passports.
Right.
That's going to exclude some people, and it's going to exclude some people of color, of lower classes that don't have access to other things, or are, do we want to do that in the arts? We cool with that? I think a lot of people are very quick to say yes because of health reasons, but like I think for me I'm really trying so hard right now to just keep both thoughts of like yep access or health. I mean, I do not want to die of coronavirus at all. I've had friends passed away with it. It's been an awful year and a half. But I think I would rather still wear a mask than keep my friends out of the room.
Yeah.
If and like that's an artistic, that's a conversation that right now it's clashing on Zoom, I think, with every small organization that has employees who work in the arts, who have friends and colleagues from all sorts of backgrounds. That's a real thing happening right now, and I'm very curious to see how it plays out because, like we said at the beginning, nobody alive has ever dealt with this,
Right.
and the best of us, with our best intentions, are making things up every day, and it's terrifying, bro. Like SoSI
Yeah.
was terrifying, but like at least we didn't have a pandemic blowing through it. Like
Right.
um, anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, you know, I think if everybody's a little less knee jerk reactionary to these issues, and we like live in the uncomfortable kind of middle ground of like considering things, the ramifications of it. Because yeah, it's easy to be like, well, of course, if you don't have a vaccine, you can't do this or that. But yeah, there are, yeah, in all parts of life, there are reasons to consider that other side, even for just a moment. Usually, maybe not all. There are
Well,
some
I
things that
think
don't deserve consideration for sure,
yeah,
right?
but I mean, again,
But
like I think it has been telling to me to see the vaccine discussion happen, and it very quickly everybody's like, "Oh, this is a political issue." It's like the news is making it one, and the New York Times is making it one because that's what gets people clicking. But in my experience, on a day-to-day basis, I have people who are not vaccinated very close to me, who I love dearly and would take a bullet for, and politics has nothing to do with it.
yeah,
And nobody can, you don't have to believe me, but like,
right,
that's the truth. And I think the more we just spent a whole year talking about diversity, equity, inclusion, and access. Inclusion and access being the like, and equity, all of it being like, we need to have everybody in the room so we compete equally and nobody's left out.
right,
But Carnegie Hall had no problem being like, we are a vaccine organization.
right,
Like, and so now I know people who are now having to write Carnegie Hall to be like, can I come in with a religious exemption? Now, maybe the answer is going to be yes, but that's exclusion. It
right.
is. Now,
Yep.
I don't necessarily disagree with the justification because public health, I also feel, is incredibly important. But like, I just wish we could say out loud, like, we are excluding on this thing because this is way more important to us. And if that means some people are going to fall by the wayside, we are making that call because we feel that's important. Then I would be like, all
Right,
right, at least you said it.
right. Transparent. I think, yeah, transparency is also, like honesty, and I think if it, yeah, transparency from in whatever avenue of life. I'm pro transparency. Like if you feel a thing, or if there's a reason why you're doing this thing, like just say it. Like yeah,
Yeah. Well, anyway, and as I said that, like, I'm immediately like, but again, I know people who are immunocompromised and or are pregnant who can't get the vaccine. They're not vaccinating pregnant people. So is Carnegie Hall just not letting pregnant people come see their shows? Is that a thing they're going to say out loud? I'll bet not. I'll bet there's
right,
an exemption that they can figure out. But like right now, there's a lot of like, you got to show your vaccine card. Again, I understand it, but I wish we as humans would acknowledge the other, like, we're constantly taking the sandbag and switching it for the idol in like Temple the lot Temple of Doom or whatever. We're constantly doing that and pretending like we aren't. And it's like,
totally. Yeah,
anyway, it's
yeah.
an interesting time in humanity, and I may change my mind tomorrow about all of this, but that's what we're
That's
here
all
for.
right. Yeah. Well, yeah. Thanks for chatting with me about that. It was like, yeah, like I don't that wasn't a throwaway post. It's a serious thing that I'm thinking about, and I think about a lot. And I'm glad that you thought enough of it to like chat.
Well, I
to try to suss it out, because I need that too. I need to like suss it further.
I think one of the things I react to most in people I care about, yourself included, or like colleagues, friends, former students, whatever. The reason I will, if you hear from me about something like that, it's usually after I've thought about it for a long time. It's usually because I am worried that you think you don't have as much power as you think you do. And like I want to, and I just because I just want to be like, bro, I can't write those grants for you. I've got a bunch of other shit I'm dealing with here,
Right.
but I just want to get on the horn and be like, Aaron, bro, you know people who write grants, and you know people who do this. You just maybe you have to work a little bit harder, and I think you could be handing out money way quicker than you think you can, than you think you do right now. And that's really the takeaway I think I want you to have from this conversation is like, bro.
Well, I'll work on that. I'll work on being the guy that hands out money, and I'll keep thinking about this. And I know you will too. I'd love to, check back in, even if it's like in an email or something, like further thoughts on this. Like I think it's like, it's a topic within our immediate like worlds that I think is worth exploring
Totally.
On a broader sense. Yeah.
Totally. Well, I appreciate you chewing the fat with me on this. And again, like I'm not holding yourself or me to anything I said today. It was mainly I love just sort of being in a like thought space and sort of chewing through through the scenarios here and you can hold me to it in 5 years. Oh, we can always chat anytime. But if in 5 years you've done the thing I've asked you to do and you became a heroin addict and lost all your family and your friends and it's my fault, you can come back and hold me responsible. And you actually lost money. You didn't give any away. Like, I will accept full responsibility for everything. All right, bro. Listen, stay healthy, and I'm sure my brother, if he were here, would give you some sort of shit. So I will. You can just imagine what he'd say.
Yeah,
and,
I wouldn't expect anything less from Zach.
Stay healthy, and I look forward to seeing you, chatting with you soon.
Yeah. All right, bud. See ya.
See you, man. Bye. Okay, I hope you enjoyed that conversation. This podcast is brought to you by Liquid Drum, liquiddrum.com down in Waco, Texas. My good friend Todd Meehan runs an amazing percussion company down there. Great merch, great content. Check him out, liquiddrum.com. Also, Kyle Dunleavy, dunleavypans.com, DUNLEAVY pans.com. Kyle Dunleavy makes and builds all the steel drums that I perform and teach on in So Percussion, as well as at NYU and Princeton. He's an amazing tuner, builder, just a really nice guy, very dependable. Check him out. If you are interested at all in steel pan advocacy, want to learn more about the goings-on in pan in Brooklyn, check out paninmotion.com. My good friend Kendall Williams, Jerry Guy, Trisha Guy, and Arisha John run an amazing organization called paninmotion.com. Check them out. And finally, Alejandro Mirage runs an amazing clothing apparel company in Brooklyn that is steel pan centric. You can check him out at mangochow, CHOW, clothing.com. I own a bunch of his shirts. They're amazing, very stylish, beautifully made. Check them out. mangochowclothing.com. Okay, hope you're well. Talk to you soon. Bye.